Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Today is December 3rd, 2022, and in this video, I'm going to be going over my predictions for the 2024 election if Trump becomes the Republican nominee and if Biden becomes the Democratic nominee. So, first and foremost, just going over the likelihoods of each one becoming the nominee of their respective parties. First of all, with Donald Trump, he is trailing behind Ron DeSantis by 7 points, as shown by predictit.org. I think that overall Trump's performance has decreased and his likelihood of becoming the nominee has decreased since Ron DeSantis had many wins in the Florida state legislature, and also he won by a very good percentage in the governor's race. Just going back to that map really quickly and seeing what happened there in Florida. Ron DeSantis wins by almost 20% against Charlie Crist. Donald Trump, as we look at what Republicans are saying about him, they're not too pleased with not only the midterm performance, where at least 30 of his hand-selected candidates lost their respective races, but also with the cultural wars that are currently happening. For example, Donald Trump recently sat down with Yi and Nick Fuentes, a white supremacist. Overall, Republicans have explained their distaste for what he's been doing and who he's been aligning himself. Mike Pence saying that he thinks that Donald Trump should apologize for it and denounce those individuals. Bill Cassidy of Louisiana also explaining similar things. John Thune, Lindsey Graham, all these different people kind of not exactly condemning him. Well, Mitt Romney was, but overall, all of them are pretty upset that he's taking the Republican Party into this direction and don't see him as a viable candidate for 2024. Ron Paul recently sat down with ABC, I believe it was, and was saying that they need to pick someone else to be the head of the Republican Party if they want to start winning elections. And so whether Ron DeSantis will be that face for them, we won't really know until about 2023 or so. But he does seem to be leading. But nevertheless, Donald Trump has a very large support base. If you want to check my video out on DeSantis versus Biden, that's already been uploaded. But nevertheless, as Trump does become the candidate, we'll see what's going to happen. And then with Biden becoming the Democratic nominee, he himself is very much leading. Gavin Newsom has already stated that he will not run against Joe Biden if he decides to run. Gavin Newsom does not want to step on anyone's toes, and also he's pretty much focused on California at the moment. Same with Pete Buttigieg. It would be very distasteful of him and also not smart for him at all to run against his boss right now. He is the Secretary of Transportation for the Biden administration, so he is definitely not going to run if Biden decides to run. Kamala Harris, again, same thing. It's her boss, her colleague, her peer. She's not going to run against him, especially not if she wants to be his vice president again. And they do seem pretty close and have a good relationship. So Joe Biden, if he does win the nomination and if he does run, he'll probably pick Kamala Harris again to be his vice president. Hillary Clinton, I think that most of her interviews and everything, she's been talking about the presidency as a thing of the past. So I don't think that she's going to run again, but it is still possible. Again, if it does occur, I don't think that she would win against Biden. I think that Democrats in particular would be wary of giving her support or fueling her campaign with money, since they would be afraid for Trump to win again against her as he did in 2016. And then AOC, I don't even know if she'll be 35 by that time or not, but even if she is, she's still very young. She has a lot of time to run. I think that as time passes, she'll become more and more popular, and that's when she should really consider a presidential bid, but not now, certainly. Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, all faces that we've seen before run for president. Amy Klobuchar, I wouldn't be surprised if she's going to run again. Bernie Sanders, I think at this point he's older than Biden by a few years or so, and also he seems very lively still, but I don't know if he has the energy in him to run. What is it going to be, a third or fourth time? A lot of runs so far, so I don't know if he wants to run or even run against Biden for that matter if Biden does decide to run. And Warren, same story, and everyone else is pretty down in the ranks, and they're certainly, even if they do run, they're certainly not going to win the nomination for the Democratic candidate. And then this race would be much more interesting if Joe Biden does not decide to run. I feel like many Democrats do not want him to run, and also the general public don't want him to run again. And so we would have a very interesting primary in that case, which with a lot of other people. Maybe we would see Cory Booker out on the stage. Who knows? And then if Joe Biden does decide to run, I don't think that many people, or any, would challenge him for that matter. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go to the map. So first I'm just going to be putting in the blue states, easy blue, states that I don't think that each candidate would lose under any. Actually, Oregon probably. I said that I would just put in the safety states, but nevertheless, I'll get back to this in a second. Most of these states Again, pretty easy to decide how they're going to sway. Um, Not much to it. And then since Republican states, um, just going through them one by one. That's, oh, okay, I believe that's it. Okay, now we stand at, um, with the certain ring at 180 to 102. So, and then overall 172 to 102. Now, just briefly going to Oregon, which I put as likely blue. I think that Oregon in past years hasn't been as strong of a blue as we thought it would. Washington, similarly, though Washington is showing much smaller signs of trending Republican than Oregon. If we go to Oregon State Legislature, it's not as blue as you would expect a safe blue state to be. You know, Ron Wyden won by a very large percentage, but still, you know, the state house and state senate are, you know, it's not securely Democratic, and that's just why. But again, not much drama there. It will definitely go. Oregon will definitely go to Biden again. 16 points. Though, you know, as you see in the other states, there's a 20-point margin in Washington, a almost 30% difference in California, New York, similar things. So, you know, Oregon just there. Not much to it, but interesting nonetheless. So the rest of the likely blue states, Colorado, oh, oops, not red. um, Either likely or lean blue. The jury's still out on that one. I think that Michael Bennet won the state seat, but still, there are like many factors that go into Colorado. Specifically, it's more of a swing state as we thought it would be in 2020, but it turned out being much more Democratic. It's pretty democratically run. So I think I would, and actually going back to the 2020 map, it was a likely Biden win with 14% margin. So, or 13.5, I apologize, 2016 being a little different. But I think what we also have to keep in mind is it's definitely not going to look like 2020 again, even if it's still the same two candidates. Since that period from now, things have really changed both for Biden and for Trump. So on the side of Biden, he has become much more unpopular. In 2020, he seemed to be more of a new face, and I say that in the way that he wasn't president, while Donald Trump was, on the way that he hasn't been in government. He's been in government for a very long time. But, you know, Trump already had his 4 years to show the Republican Party in America in general what he was going to do in office, and people didn't like that. And also his handling of the COVID pandemic mixed with all the cultural things. But again, when there's a new candidate versus a president that didn't do as well, that new candidate is lightly favored. And so that's why I think that Trump has a much better chance in 2024 than he did in 2020. You can look at, for example, at the beginning of this video, I showed the Republican remarks to Trump's dinner with Ye and Nick Fuentes. But I think that one thing that we should keep in mind here, and that is somewhat overemphasized in modern media and also American politics, is the effect of culture and, you know, politically correct speech and everything like that. Even though different people have different opinions on it, I think that's not as big of an issue as pundits and politicians make it out to be. Because when someone is going to vote, they're not going to be thinking about this candidate said this or that unless it really does affect them personally. What they're going to be thinking about is the money that they're paying at the gas station, or what they're going to be spending on, or how, you know, their health care, all these different issues that actually affect them day to day, you know, their grocery shopping bill, rather than some politician's policy that slightly offends or whatever a certain group. And even though that is bad, they're not going to base their opinion on that solely. And so obviously a really controversial thing that Trump did here, but I don't think that it's going to affect 2024 as much as people are making out to seem. We don't know yet, and this is a projection that I'm making 2 years in advance. And so we don't know what's going to happen in 2024. We don't know what Biden is going to do in the next 2 years of his presidency, and we don't know what Trump is going to do in the next 2 years of him being a civilian, but also heavily active in the political sphere. With that being said, I think that overall the map that I will be showing is not going to look like the 2020 map, maybe slightly more 2016, but somewhere in the middle, I think, is what I am going to be projecting, because 2016 we saw Hillary, a very unpopular candidate among a lot of America. So just going through Colorado, I think somewhere between likely and lean, not exactly sure which one. Going to New Hampshire, I think that New Hampshire is incredibly interesting in that it has these different sways of becoming Democratic or Republican or everything. And as we saw in 2016, Clinton only won it by almost a third of a percent, just over. And so that's a very, very, very small percentage. Biden won it by a slightly larger percentage, but still, I think that New Hampshire is not safe by any means, which is something that you wouldn't expect from the Northeast, except for Maine. Maine's also an outlier here, but we have this state up here who doesn't follow the regular voting pattern that is expected from this region. And then just going to the state results from the midterms, everything is pretty strongly Democratic, but we have to also look at the margins. This was a 9-point margin. Maggie Hassan staying a senator for the state of New Hampshire. And then the governor remaining a Republican by 16-point margin, which is very large. And then again, this is just furthering the polls that we're seeing of New Hampshire being more of a swing state in some respect, and then the governorship and the state senate being Republican led, the state senate being Republican led by only a small majority, and then the state house being almost evenly split, and then other races being pretty Republican heavy. And so I think that leads New Hampshire to being right here. I think that's where it should be. Not a tilt. I still think that it will go to Biden, but if things keep trending in the way that they have been, in Biden becoming more and more unpopular, even though he has been able to save his approval rating since July, that was his all-time low. Now he's ranging in the low 40s or so, I believe. Then, he will win New Hampshire. And then just going to Maine real quick. First district, if this will allow me. Maine District 2. I think it's going to be a lean blue, and then District 1 will be most likely Republican, and then District 1 pretty solidly actually Democratic. Okay. And then just going, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing for both of these years. Again, somewhere in the middle there. And I think that Maine as a state is very interesting. They have ranked choice voting, for example, that really shows what the population is thinking specifically. Janet Mills won the governorship, the House, the Senate, all these things are Democratic. Overall, the first district will go to Democrats. And to Republicans, I apologize slightly, but then everything else is pretty solidly blue. Going over into the South for a minute, I think that this will allow. Texas, to no surprise, likely red. Texas was more of a swing state in 2016 and 2020 than I think it ought to be. Texas, to no surprise, will undoubtedly go to Donald Trump. The state, maybe in 2020 or 2016, was seen more as a swing state, but in recent, polls and everything, I don't think that it as a swing state at all. The state house and the state senate do show a pretty accurate depiction of what's happening. It has a strong Republican or a semi-Republican hold where they're leading by a sizable percentage here. And all the other races, well, they're all pretty much Republican, except for a few down there. But nevertheless, I think that Texas is going to Donald Trump, whether recent polls change or not, that's self-explanatory. And then Florida, same thing. As we can tell by Ron DeSantis' wins and everything that happened in Florida in the midterms, Florida had very strong Republican wins, and I don't think that there's any world in which Biden would win it. Maybe in 2016 or 2020 it was seen as more of a swing state, but definitely not now. I think that, especially after these midterms, now I think it's going to keep trending more and more red, as we see here 1.2, and then in 2020 3.4, and I think it's only going to increase that size percentage from of Trump winning. Just moving up here to to South and North Carolina, I think that those also need to be heavily based upon recent polling and everything. The North Carolina state legislature is something that's very much of interest to me. I think that it does it's not reflected as much in who it votes for on a presidential level, because even though as much as we can look at these polls and everything, it won't be, as these don't show exactly how people vote. What we need to really look at is maps like these that show the size percentage between the two candidates and how much they win the states by. So I think that North Carolina, I think that, Trump won it by a small percentage. I think that he's only going to win it by a larger percentage due to Biden's unpopularity. But recently, actually, a new article came out of the Democrats trying to get South Carolina and other more of these southern states that have more diverse backgrounds of voting to be the first in the primaries instead of Iowa. But who knows? Um, that shows that they do want to make more wins in Florida and South Carolina. South Carolina, actually, no, sorry, being a likely red, North Carolina, or being a lean red, North Carolina being a likely red. And then just going up to Virginia, not much surprise there. Virginia votes this way pretty much in most elections. 2016, Clinton won it by 5.3. In 2020 by 10.1, with Biden winning it by a very large percentage. But I think that even if Clinton was able to win it, then Biden won't be able to win it by around the same, like 5 to 7 point margins. Going to Pennsylvania, which was considered a swing state, and I still think that it is, but much less than other people think it's going to be. I think that Pennsylvania, as we've seen, first of all, not only did John Fetterman win in the Senate, Josh Shapiro, not Ben Shapiro, Josh Shapiro won in the governorship, another Democrat, and all three toss-up House seats in Pennsylvania were all won by the Democrats. And so I think that Pennsylvania is more and more trending blue. And I think that John Fetterman is a really strong and good candidate for the Democrats, and he relates very much to Pennsylvania voters. And so if over the next few years he can do a very good job to represent them in the Senate, then with his no doubt sponsorship of, or like promotion of Joe Biden, then Pennsylvania will definitely lean towards there. Also, Joe Biden being from Pennsylvania, though that doesn't guarantee anything at all or really sway votes as much, it still is a good touch base with Pennsylvania voters. And then just going to Kansas, I think that over recent years we've seen it become a little more Democratic and have Democrats have a larger voice in Kansas specifically. Kansas is very interesting because they did vote to uphold their pro-choice laws that they had in, what was it, November or earlier. They're not as Republican as you would expect them to be, being from this region. And again, those the 2020 election results mimic that, 14.6, much larger in 2016. But still, I think that I do think that Donald Trump will win it just by a smaller percentage. And then going upstairs to Kansas's rival, Nebraska, District 1, no doubt it's going to be pretty red there, pretty blue there, it being a main city and all. And then the second district being a lean red. And then, these election results pretty much show the same thing. I think that Nebraska is only, and Kansas in particular as well, these two states and Iowa as well are only becoming more and more Democratic. I think that in the near future we might see Kansas or even Iowa becoming more of swing states. I think that Minnesota is a blue state, as we've seen from polls. I don't think that's going to be as much of a swing state as Wisconsin and Michigan are. Again, just from polls and everything, not to be redundant with everything else. Wisconsin, I think a tilt red, not much at all. I don't think that if the Republicans win it, that they'll win it by that big of a margin. Ron Johnson, the Republican, won against Mandela Barnes by only 1%. And if we go back to 2016 in particular, Trump won it by 0.76. Joe Biden won it by even smaller of a percentage, 0.63. And so Wisconsin, no doubt, will be very much of a toss-up. We'll have to see what happens with that, but I do think that Trump does have the upper hand in Wisconsin, at least, just from what we've been seeing, and those Wisconsin voters electing someone, Ron Johnson, who very much represents the same ideals as President Trump does. And in Michigan, I think that that's a state that's very much, again, another swing state. I think that's going to be tilt blue, just again from what we've been saying, just to go to the state results again. Michigan is more blue than Wisconsin, in particular, Gretchen Whitmer winning by a very large percentage. Because, and I say 11, not because it's very large, because there's certainly larger percentages than that, but because Tudor Dixon very much represents what Donald Trump and Kari Lake and all these other alt-right Republicans do. And so her winning by such a large percentage against Whitmer, when it was predicted to be a toss-up race, not as much of a toss-up, but leaning slightly towards Gretchen Whitmer. I think this says a lot to Michigan and Michigan voters and everything. And then obviously all these state legislature, the governor, the state senate, the state house, all reinforcing that. But again, looking at the actual state house and state senate, Democrats have a very, very slight majority in both of these state legislatures. So I don't think that Democrats should be relying all too much on Michigan. It's going to be a swing state. We're going to have to watch it on election night 2024, see what happens. But Wisconsin, Michigan, tilt red for the former and tilt blue for the latter. Just underneath, we can go to Indiana next. Even looking at these and also our predictions, I think I'm going to change it to a safe Republican state, and then Ohio being a likely red. As we saw, J.D. Vance won by a large percentage against Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan being a very moderate Democrat. Like when we look at the grand scope of where the Democratic Party has been going, Tim Ryan is pretty moderate. And so I think that if Tim Ryan wasn't able to win, I think he lost by about 7%, then Biden will definitely not win. And then again, just looking at these results, same things here, 8.1, 8.0, Ohio is going to go to Donald Trump in 2024. And then the three other states that are pretty much swing states on the national scale. So I think that New Mexico is a likely blue. The state legislature, everything we see there is blue. For the most part. And then just going over to Nevada, I think that it will very much be a toss-up. What we see in a lot of elections is that Catherine Cortez Masto, being a moderate, barely won to an extremist for the most part. And so that in response to though don't be mistaken by the governor's race, both Joe Lombardo and Stilisak are pretty moderates, and so him winning by only a small percentage, I think that does say a lot, in that Nevadan voters don't want an extremist. They would much rather a moderate Democrat, but they'd also rather a moderate Republican over a moderate Democrat. And so I think if we look at the national stage, what is Trump presenting? He's all right. So Adam Laxalt, same thing. And then we look at Joe Biden, who is more of a moderate Democrat, but also he hasn't been that popular nationwide. And so who knows what's going to happen with that race. But I think because of voting patterns in Nevada, I'm going to put it as a tilt blue. Again, I do have to decide whether it's tilt blue or tilt red in the end. But and just looking at here at the results so far, we have two states left. Either can determine the winner, or I guess not as much Trump, but 243 to 266. Arizona, I think that Arizona is going to go to Donald J. Trump. A tilt red, if you will. That is going to be a very, 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 very close race. And I really want to emphasize that because Kari Lake won or lost against Katie Hobbs by a very small percentage. I think it was less than 1% or maybe 1% exactly. And so Arizona is not safe democratically at all. We look at the governorship again, like 0.7%. That's how much Kari Lake lost by. And so Kari Lake is a female Donald Trump in respects to policy and everything. And so I don't think that Biden would be able to win. And so I think that Arizona is going to be a likely or a tilt red state. And then last but not least, Georgia. Georgia was also the last state that I did in the Ron DeSantis to Biden mashup. Georgia again, there's a lot that goes into Georgia, and I think that really can be summarized. Oh, I forgot to do this. I forgot. I did, but just to. Oh wait, sorry. Yes. Now back to Georgia. Georgia is extremely interesting. I think that what we're seeing here is that there is a it's very similar to Nevada, in which when faced with Brian Kemp versus Stacey Abrams does give more of a progressive Democratic feel versus uh, Brian Kemp, isn't like Trump at all. He rejected Trump's request to uh, make up votes in Georgia, and so him being more of a moderate in that respect, or not alt-right, rather, that's a better term than moderate. Um, I think that says a lot, but then also in the runoff, again, this is December 3rd that I'm filming this. I do not know what is going to be happening with the race with Warnock and Herschel Walker, though Warnock does seem to be leading against him, but then again, a moderate Democrat versus an extremist Republican versus the other way around was a moderate Republican against a progressive Democrat, not extremist necessarily, and so I really don't know what's going to be happening with Georgia, but I think that the predictions for the Senate with Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker, it was predicted that Warnock was going to win. It was, uh, projecting that from the 2020 results, where Georgia was won by 0.24, and then won by Trump in 2016 by 5.1. And so I'm going to give Georgia to Donald Trump, a tilt red, and that puts Trump over the top with 272 and Biden at 263. This is my election prediction for 2024 with Trump against Biden. I think that any of these states could change. Well, not the safe states, of course, but any of the rest of these states could change, um, depending on what we see in the next few years, not only from polling, but also from Biden's performance, his approval rating, and also Trump and what he does with his audience. And rather, I think that if he takes the right steps and strays away from, things like this, I think that he will very much, and if he also gets the approval of other Republicans and gets them on board with his campaign, other Republicans who are more moderate or have more of a sway in the Senate or the House, then he will have a much stronger win. But I do project Donald Trump as being the winner in 2024 if he goes against Biden. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.